who's a forensic specialist for CERT US.
Stand by. Forensic specialist, but evidently not the PowerPoint specialist. All right, that's good. All right, hi. Thanks. Sorry about the late start. Thanks a lot for joining me. I know that there's a very trendy iPhone demonstration going on next door, so I appreciate it. Thank you. All right. I'm going to be talking about what I'm going to just refer to as difficult data acquisition, the general title. Subtitle is going to be how you build your own password cracker in 15 minutes with a disassembler and some VM magic. We'll do that towards the end of my talk. First, I'd like to get a little background, just a little background about CERT. You guys probably know it, or most of you hopefully know it, as a place that publishes vulnerability reports, that runs something called the CERT Coordination Center, which helps set up and coordinate international CERTs, computer emergency response teams at the national level across the world. It's a U.S. government federally funded research and development center, which makes it sort of like a national lab, like Sandia National Labs or Lawrence Livermore National Labs. Our focus for research is information security. We're housed at Carnegie Mellon University in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, which is very convenient since Carnegie Mellon has some excellent IT resources. And we also have a forensics team, which I'm on. We do work mainly for law enforcement and other government security agencies. We're not pure research. Our work is split about half-half between R&D, research and development, and what we call operational support. Research and development, we're not a huge team. We're not a big software house. We focus on developing tools and techniques that meet what we see as gap areas in the current forensic practice, forensic community of our customers. So we're talking mainly law enforcement investigators. And we try to fill some gap areas in existing tools that they don't fill. We also provide some training in how to use these tools and distribute these tools to the law enforcement community. And we have some publicly available tools too. I'll highlight one later that's open source and widely available. The other half of our time is spent doing analysis on a case-by-case basis with law enforcement agencies. We have the two major U.S. Federal agencies, the FBI and the Secret Service, both have liaison officers that are housed full-time at CERT, and so we work closely with them. And we have done acquisition support as well. We do an increasing amount of acquisition support. Basically means accompanying search teams in order to help acquire data from systems that are being searched if there's any indication that those systems are going to be difficult or tricky. So, in case it isn't clear by now, I'm speaking from a perspective that might be a little unusual at the conference. I'm speaking at it from the perspective of a forensic investigator. So when I talk, try to keep that in mind. Hopefully it'll be a refreshing change. If I make references to legal stuff, it'll probably be based in U.S. law, which is what I know the best. All right, so much for the perspective. And background, I think this is an incredibly exciting time for forensics, for forensic analysis, for forensic investigators. There's a rash of new tools and techniques that are blooming. We've seen some very sophisticated techniques using JTAG access ports and custom-made harnesses to grab information from embedded devices, to grab data straight off flash RAM chips, and to then be able to use, for example, the wear leveling translation tables inside those flash RAM chips to create a nice history of data deletion and data creation on that flash RAM chip. Stuff that you can't see actually at the device level. The big mainstream forensic platforms are likewise making some amazing changes. They're both moving towards a distributed processing framework, which will allow them to handle the multi-terabyte sort of sets of data that we're acquiring, are becoming very common to acquire, in fact, and live forensics and memory-focused analysis, which we've seen. Actually, yesterday, Peter Silverman gave a very good discussion about Mandiant's new tool for reconstituting processed memory space from a physical memory dump. Stuff like that makes this really, really exciting. We're extracting a good deal more, finding a good deal more data to analyze and extracting a good deal more. And that's great news. But there's one area that hasn't moved at quite the same pace and is actually creating a rising and very daunting challenge for law enforcement in particular, and it hasn't been addressed by any of the advances I've discussed. And I'm going to be talking about that area mainly at this presentation. So what that is acquisition, basically seizing, grabbing data, grabbing what you want to analyze. There's several problems that are becoming increasingly significant in this area. The biggest one is pervasive encryption. So it used to be that if you were talking about sophisticated computer criminals and trying to acquire data, trying to search their computers, trying to seize their computers for evidence, it wouldn't be much of a surprise to find that some form of encryption was being used to protect probably what you wanted to see. But increasingly, this is becoming quite common across the board. We're seeing this in criminals who are using computers as a simply ancillary component of their activities, right? Even just for email, right? These guys are becoming increasingly aware that that they've got stuff they want to hide and to use encryption to do it. Another thing that's going to become somewhat of a problem, although not of the same scale, is the ability to bind hardware devices using a TPM, using the TPM chip, so that you can't sort of rip a hard drive out of a computer and get it to work on another computer, or at least not easily. There are some other countermeasures. I'm going to show you some pictures of some cute ones. But the thing that's really, perhaps is going to surprise some of the people in the room, these trends are creating a serious problem for law enforcement in that they have to change not just the technology that they use to acquire data, but they have to change the entire sort of vertical chain of related events that law enforcement need to succeed. They have to change their legal framework, and you could go on for a long time about this, but just one area is search warrants, right? Everybody thinks of search warrants as what you see on television with people kicking a door in, and SWAT team runs in, everybody freezes right down on the ground. Actually, that's called a no-knock warrant. A very, very, very small percentage of warrants in the States are no-knock warrants. And in fact, in computer crime, they're exceedingly rare, or have been up till now. There was the federal district in the West Coast, responsible for the Silicon Valley and San Francisco, had not issued one no-knock warrant for a computer crime till about a year ago, till about last October, in fact. And it was a big deal when it did write that first one. And it was also very important, by the way. It made a big difference in being able to seize the data. And so that's actually helping change the way courts are looking at this. Tactical issues, right? So the team that goes in, the entry team, is not the forensic analysts. I can assure you when they go into a building, they look very different from me. As a result, these guys are primarily focused on officer safety, on making sure that the building's secure, and making sure that other people in the building aren't harmed, and for traditional sort of evidence destruction, so guys flushing stuff down the toilet, right? Now they've got to be aware of all the subtle ways that data can be destroyed, because data is their evidence now, and to figure out ways to stop it and keep that in mind when they go in. It's a big change. It's actually a really big change for law enforcement. And finally, there are technological changes, which wouldn't surprise anybody, and we'll talk a little bit more about them. So I've already mentioned some of this. Encryption is becoming a lot more common, as I said, and for the reasons I've said. we're not seeing much file-based encryption anymore. Instead, it's being edged out by full disk encryption or container-based, right? So like the old style TrueCrypt also still does it, but the TrueCrypt where you take a big encrypted container and then you can mount it as a volume and unmount it very rapidly. So what this means for forensic investigators is that recovery is going to be all or nothing, more than likely, right? You're either going to be able to get to that system and get access to a container that's mounted or a disk that's on a running system and therefore decrypted, or you're probably not going to get anything unless you can somehow get the passphrase. That means access to the live boxes becomes critical, and that feeds back into what some of the other changes in the acquisition process I've talked about. In the two most recent cases where we were on hand to help with acquisition, both federal, both multi-site searches, so there were dozens of systems seized at the same time at multiple locations. Every single storage device that could have contained evidence or did contain evidence that was of interest, it was used for anything interesting in this organization, had full disk encryption. Most of them had multiple layers of countermeasures, but every single one was full disk encrypted. That's, I mean, it's an anecdote, right? There's just two cases, but and they were fairly major, but that's an indication of what is coming down the pike. And here's another indication, TrueCrypt downloads. Well, that's not too surprising. These are cumulative downloads. There's now more than 7 million TrueCrypt packages that have been downloaded. A lot of them are replacements, you know, upgrades from version to version. But as you can see, the curve is steepening. We're getting an increased use. And for those of you, I'm sure everybody does know, but TrueCrypt's a very popular open source, probably the most popular open source encryption application. Now, here's some less likely that you know countermeasures. Anybody here know what a RASCAT is? Anybody ever seen one? A RASCAT is an electromagnetic field generator, right? It's like a giant degausser. Or not giant, it's actually about this big. You can see it. There's one picture up there that shows it embedded inside a computer case. There's also a backup battery for this. They think this through. So you can't pull the power plug on the computer and disable the RASCAT. It's made in Russia. You can buy it from eraser.ru if you're interested. You can trigger, there's an external unit, the white one in the middle of the frame there. You can trigger it with a little key fob, like a car alarm key fob, car opener remote. And it'll generate an electromagnetic pulse that will basically wipe your disk for you. It'll make it unusable, in fact. Some folks had it looked at by the Seagate people. Seagate has a research lab in Pittsburgh. And they tested it on a number of their drives and found that, yeah, it's very effective. Another thing they like to do is booby-trap the case. So when you open the case to try to get to the hard drive, boom, it triggers the RASCAT. They've also got proximity key fobs. These things are, you know, come in different shapes and sizes. I've just got one displayed here. But when you move more than 6 to 12 feet from a computer and you've still got the key fob on you, it can trigger a variety of programmable events in the computer, from locking it to dismounting your encrypted containers to shutting it down. You know, pick your level of paranoia. So these are all considerations right now for when you're setting up a search, when you are arresting somebody or trying to facilitate a search, the scene. So, oh, that's a good echo. That's your best case scenario. That's what I like. Right? If you walk into a room, this is a hotel room in case you couldn't tell, and there's a giant panel antenna sitting on top of the lamp. And a couple of computers running. They're unlocked. You've got probably at least one felony on each screen as you walk in. That's actually a really interesting situation because you've even got Evian there while you wait for the disk to image. That's really nice, right? You can't get better than that. On the other hand, something along this line is actually more common. Now, that computer monitor looks like it's on, but that could just be a big grease stain. And I guarantee you that everybody in that room is going to be using 3 pairs of latex gloves just to go through that trash.